Well, so Passage of the Tortoise. This was such a fascinating piece, and many different components, and a lot to kind of think through. Would you want to just kind of introduce us to the piece and maybe talk about some parts of it?
Yes, yes. So, Passage of the Tortoise has actually been something I've been working on for years. And um, uh, I want to say I started in about 2015 or 2014. I was an artist in residence at Root Division. And through that experience, I had started teaching um, in several schools, several middle schools in San Francisco. And I was trying to come up with art projects that were relevant to the population of the school. Um, the first school that I was teaching at was Cesar Chavez in the Mission. And so, I had a couple of introductory meetings with middle school kids. I've never taught middle school. I teach university level, but I don't teach kids. So it's a different dynamic, right? And I started thinking about the border, about the fact that children are so generous with their stories. They were very open about um, who they were. And when we started talking about the fact that we all were Latinos and we could speak Spanish, and I don't think I had ever heard an adult openly say, when I crossed the border illegally, blah, 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 where the children were saying these things. And it struck me really, the honesty that comes with that. Again, the word vulnerability, I very often think of this in art. And so I started thinking about them. And I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of alebrijes. Alebrijes are these magical creatures. They're mythological hybrid animals that exist in Mexican mythology. And they're kind of spirit animals that help you through through life difficulties. They tend to be associated with the Day of the Dead, and they kind of come to life around that time of the year, around this time of the year. So I started thinking of, and children know a lot about alebrijes because they're very beautifully painted animals. They can become piñatas, So I started playing with the children, playing with this idea of alebrijes and what would your spirit animal be, and let's create our spirit animal. And very quickly, once we started talking about immigration, the animals of the desert became really important to our conversation. So we were talking a lot about desert animals and their adaptations to the desert. That's for me where this whole thing started. And I was thinking of the tortoise in particular as this rugged, physically rugged looking animal, right? Who carries her home on her back. And this home protects her from the elements, but at the same time makes her clumsy and kind of cumbersome, right? And it's difficult for her to navigate. And yet she does survive. So this idea of kind of animal symbolism in the desert came to me through this exploration. There's also the coyote, right? The trickster, the person in in this immigrant journey who helps, and we can use that word in very, very loose quotations, right? Who helps the traveler through the desert. The idea of the snake that sheds its skin, and also, again, thinking of the desert as a liminal space where you have to transform, and you do transform from being a legal standing citizen of a country, whatever country that may be, and then you emerge from the desert as someone undocumented. And that transformation, and that's only one transformation, right? There's multiple levels of transformation that are occurring. The idea that you're leaving behind, you're part of a family, you're part of a clan, you're part of a society, and then over here you're disconnected from everything, and there's more questions and answers on the other side of the border, on the other side of the desert. So that's where the tortoise symbolism comes from. Moving forward, I kind of played with that with this group of children for about a year. We were working on uh, different ways of thinking of what would we bring with us, what would be home, what would symbolize home, what would be that um, uh, shell, if you will, that tortoise shell for ourselves. And I left the project for a while. I got busy doing other things. And a couple of, actually, I think like 3 or 4 years ago, I started teaching a class at Stanford. And again, this idea of immigration and borders emerged again in my class. I was teaching a class, an immersion class in Spanish, but it was about art. And it was titled Over the Border and Through the Hood. And it was an idea of the border being really malleable, and how, you know, you can put up a border, but culture is always going to be the border. It doesn't care about culture. So anyway, this semester, Hostile Terrain 94, which is a project spearheaded by Jason De Leon, is going to be in exhibition at the Cantor Museum on Stanford campus. And my colleague, Gina Hernandez, who is teaching a class on Hostile Terrain 94 and kind of different responses to it, invited me to participate. And she asked me to be, or to kind of spearhead an artistic response to Hostile Terrain 94. And I thought, perfect, it's the Tortoise Project again. And this time, I did more research in terms of what physically travelers take with them through the border. And there are certain things that were not surprising, you know, kind of religious amulets, rosaries, little like printed stamps of St. Luke, the patron of lost causes. Then there was also mundane things such as combs and brushes and toothpaste and toothbrushes, deodorant, food, tuna cans, a lot of tuna cans, things that you'd expect, a little bit of money, a cell phone. But also, and these two objects were the ones that most resonated with me, because it speaks to our humanity and it speaks to our you know, being eternal optimists, perhaps, which is kind of a must for humanity. A lot of travelers take with them condoms and contraceptive pills, which to me is like this wonderful way of saying, there's someone on the other side of this who's going to want to have sex with me, right? And how much more human can you get than that, right? The idea that there's human connection on the other side, and that life is going to continue, and that I'm going to have pleasure or I'm going to find pleasure in that other world. So this iteration of the Tortoise Project was to look at these objects and to humanize the traveler. Forget the words and the stereotypes that that our society puts on people who take this journey, and instead put ourselves in the shoes of the traveler. And what would we take with us if we had to take this, you know, desperate voyage? So that was kind of the impetus of the project.
Great. It's such a wonderful way of bringing together all of these different themes associated with migration and border crossing, from, you know, sort of practical dimensions to more thematic questions and conversations about culture and memory, and also the burdensome dimensions, right? I mean, the idea that the tortoise's shell is both a shelter and a burden in some sense. You know, am I on the right track?
Yes,
Is that something?
you're absolutely on the right track. Yes.
And I was thinking about some of the different, you know, number of different people were contributing through their own, you know, experiences and kind of lines of questioning. And I was interested in the different materials that, you know, artists use to, yeah, for this project.
Yes.
And one thing that struck me was that in each case, there's a kind of or in several cases, there's the materials they deteriorate in a sense. So like Michael's, uses flame and turns wood to ash, and I think you used a rubber or a latex or something which has the trans. You talked before about snake skin.
Yes,
So could you tell me a bit about that?
absolutely. We did a lot of, we talked a lot about the project, but it was also, I think that we also kind of meditated on our own experience as immigrants, or our own experiences as people who have taken journeys of transformation, not only of immigration, but just in general. I think at some point we had talked about, there are lots of liminal journeys that we take throughout our lives. The journey down the aisle for someone who's getting married, or the journey across a stage when we get our diplomas, when we finish an educational milestone. Um, the journey to motherhood, or the journey to parenthood, the journey to death. These are psychological and physical journeys that we take. And so we were talking a lot about how can we understand a journey such as this one through our own experience. And so it was, I think there was a lot of meditation involved, to be honest. Michael started talking a lot about water and about, as I said before, he grew up in a border town, right? And the idea that his body is actually kind of a symbol of the border, right? Where there's cultural references to Mexico and also to the United States kind of clashing, and that people might even just impose certain stereotypes on him by virtue of how he appears, instead of digging deeper, and looking at him and kind of drawing conclusions without really understanding him further. So he was talking a lot about water and the importance of water, and the importance of it from a cultural point of view, the culture of his ancestors, a religious cultural importance. So the idea of baptism, and how he would bring this water that he did not intend on drinking, right? So it wasn't going to be used for any practical purposes. It was going to be used for a symbolic cleansing. So this is water from his hometown that he would bring with him on a journey to his newfound home, and then baptize himself with this water. So how kind of keeping this water safe and bringing it with him was in a way holding on to values, right? And holding on to ideas of the past, but bringing him with him also to sanctify his future or his present. And so the photograph that we see here being destroyed or made into ash is a photograph of that baptism. And then fire and water kind of destroying it and allowing perhaps for something new to emerge.
Yeah, very cool.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just, so I love hearing about all this, and Michael's, hearing him talk about Laredo is so wonderful. One of the other themes, and this is I think quite related, I think has to do with sort of presence and absence, and this is also related to memory and to loss. So I think it's Vivian's piece that uses the both eggshells, which are another sort of symbol of fertility and futurity, but also there's something kind of spectral or haunting about her piece. I wonder if you could tell me a bit about it.
So this piece is this is called Calcified, and Vivian and I had several conversations about this before we did the performance. It all started kind of simply with the idea of the tortoise shell, right? And thinking about shells and different types of shells. But then we were thinking a lot about memory, about breath, about the fact that we, from the day we were born, we start breathing, and it's that same breath that carries us through to the end of our days, and that our DNA is somehow involved in that breath. That, the day we stopped that breath, it's a continuum, right? The whole idea is that that breath, no matter where we are, it's a continuum of who we were to who we will be. So we started thinking a lot metaphorically about how to engage breath, how to engage memory, and how to engage the idea that memory fragments. We had read an article about how every time we as humans go back to a certain memory, that memory kind of gets distorted and erodes and cracks, if you will. It's one step further removed from the actual event that happened in the past. That's just the way that our memories, that our brain works with memory. So we started thinking about the eggs as memories that every time that we engaged with them, every time we touched them, the eggshell would crack further and would become more fragmented, but that somehow we were holding on to those fragments and acknowledging their worth, right, their value in our existence. So there's also the component of sound in the background. Right now we can't hear it, but we also have a woman, her name is Claire Gendler, and she's a opera singer, and she's singing the song Bésame by Consuelo Velasquez. Consuelo Velasquez wrote this in 1940. She's a Mexican musician. And at first, we were thinking about the word, Bésame means kiss me, which was not exactly what we were going for. But then if you hear the words, the verse right after kiss me, it says, como si fuera esta noche la última vez, as if today were the last day. So we were thinking about that last night before we depart, before we leave our loved ones behind. And the next line in the song is, pues tengo miedo a perderte después, because I'm fearing that I will lose you afterwards. So when we were getting ready for this performance, Vivian and I did some fire breathing to kind of get to a state of, I'm trying to read here the words that I wanted to use, a state of heightened awareness, and kind of getting back to those memories of the last time we slept in our beds as, for me in Costa Rica, or for Vivian in Colombia, the last time we were in our parents' home, the night before we decided that we were leaving. This project was packed with metaphors, from the breath, from the music, and the eggshells in our bodies.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. Maybe you could tell, we didn't talk about this before, but maybe you could say a little bit about how you envision your role as curator and collaborator, because it sounds, really like it begins from I guess, a conceptual level, or through conversation and through kind of searching across different themes.
So yeah, that's a really good question. If there's one piece that I've been, as I said before, I've been kind of working with this concept for years, way before We the People got together. But by putting it into the realm of our collective, it took on a different light. It took on a different life. And we had a lot of conversations as a collective, and we also had a lot of conversations individually, in terms of, where do we want to take this? And some of our ideas were very personal. Some of our ideas required more intimacy, and so a lot of collaboration emerged. For instance, in Jesse's piece, the Botari piece, we were talking a lot about, so the Botari is, I don't know if I'm saying that properly. I think I am. I hope, hopefully. But the Botari is a traditional cloth that is used to wrap objects when you're quickly, right? You need to leave quickly. And so, you know, in my brain, when I started hearing Jesse talk about this, it sounded like the hobo baggers, you know, something like this from an American perspective. Um, and and so Jesse was, you know, engaging in this over and over again. And I think this happened to all of us. We had several sessions of critique where we would bring the object, and then we'd next time the object had modified, you know, and something had changed. And it was because of those really rich conversations that we had emerged with a richer, a deeper understanding of where we really wanted to go with this. So um, uh, we're in pandemic. We don't have access to a lot of things right now. Jessie is a screen printer. She knows how to print quite well, but she doesn't have access to screen printing right now. And I do. I have a studio here at home. So I ended up screen printing a lot of the objects that Jessie then stitched together. So for me, one of the reasons why all these collaborations were really interesting is because I really think that liminal voyages, such as you know, the transition or the Sonora Desert is for immigrants, you have to rely on other people, right? You rely on others to strengthen you, either physically taking the journey with somebody else, or emotionally remembering your family, or again that idea of I'm going to connect with somebody else later on in life. There is the hope of having sex again, you know, or something like this. So this idea that a lot of these projects emerge from collaborations, from needing to collaborate. For instance, in this case, right, we wanted to screen print this, and the only way that because of social distancing, because of pandemic, it had to be me who had the access to the screen printing to do this. And then from the perspective of Vivian's piece, it wasn't so much a physical need, more that the conversation that led to this project grew from our, you know, grew from us. And then we realized that it would be a lot stronger if we performed it together.
Wow, yeah, fantastic. I also love all the different media. You know, it's such an extraordinary mix, and yeah, it's great. You know, one thing I was thinking about was the idea of performance and embodiment and kind of practice, and I was thinking about Nivi's use of song and language,
Yes.
and was interested to learn, you know, from I read her artist statement that she's compelled by the idea of a kind of a lost language and the prospect of a new beginning, or a song that perhaps one has lost the tune, you know, to extend the metaphor. So.
So what is lost and what is gained, right? Because it's not that simple. It's not just losing bits and pieces. There's also a gain. Nivi was talking about the fact that she like officially went to school in English all of her life in India. And of course that meant that she, you know, her English is very well developed, let's say. But in the process of only been educated in English, there's been a loss in terms of her native tongue. There are certain words that have disappeared from her language, right? From her personal language. They still exist, but she doesn't access them anymore. So she was talking about this idea of what was gained and what was lost. And it occurred to me that um, language is one of those cultural elements that so root us. We call it a mother tongue, right? Even in the way that we speak about language, it's so personal, um, so intimate, and losing the ability, or losing some of the nuance of that mother tongue is is something that I think we all struggle with, especially when we leave our home countries and now live in a society where we speak another language all day long. Um, so playing with this kind of lullaby that she is singing, and kind of reminding herself of where she comes from, and how she belongs to this language. And she's also incorporating two other really important cultural elements, in my opinion. She's using turmeric as this yellow ochre color that she's working with. Turmeric, of course, being a spice that is so present in a lot of Indian food. And again, language and food being some of those like really basic cultural um, uh, uh, roots, or things that root us to our culture. And then the kumkum, which is culturally really symbolic, right? Hindu women um, mark themselves as being married once they put the kumkum on their forehead. So using all these symbols of her mother country, or of her culture, um, and, um, and kind of playing with them, um, in a way, kind of mixing them with this new reality of who she is today, or how these two realities have come together.
Yeah, it seems that many of these pieces have that quality of rupture, or
Mhm.
some kind of a transformation, akin to what you were discussing with Barbarians at the Gate, right? This threshold through which one passes.
Yeah. On that note, Jasmine's piece, we were talking about water with Michael's piece before. Jasmine's piece also uses water, and also uses the idea of cultural symbolism. She tells us the story that when she left China, her grandmother gave her a little satchel of dirt from their backyard and said, if you're ever homesick, um, make some tea with this dirt, and you'll basically consume your history again, be rooted in your home. And so she plays with this idea of the American dream, and trying to, there's always humor in Jasmine's approach to art making, I think, or at least from my perspective, she uses humor really well. And so she was kind of playing with this idea of becoming more American by consuming dirt from City Hall and mixing it with water from Ocean Beach, and will this make her more American, or will somehow bring her to her American dream, bring her closer to her American dream.
Yeah, oh, fantastic. Um, Yes, uh, I mean, I guess it's the end of my list, but I would love to hear more. I mean, are there other dimensions to the project that we should touch on?
I haven't told you about Oscar's
Yeah,
piece,
I'd love to hear about
and
Oscar's piece.
I wanted to maybe tell you a little bit about my own
Please.
interpretation of it. We talk a lot about the idea of the border as being more than just a physical
Mhm.
space, but also a psychological space and emotional space. And Oscar was playing with kind of all of this in the making of this painting. This is a collage slash painting, uh, and uh, he was kind of depicting the landscape of the desert in this piece, as well as the emotional landscape of uh, all that is left behind, all that is lost, and what you take with you. So this titled Solo mi fe, which means only my faith. And at the end of the day, this is such a dangerous voyage, such a difficult voyage. and almost like a rite of passage. You know, if you emerge on the other side alive, then somehow you have the strength to endure whatever else you know, being an undocumented person in the United States will throw at you. Um, and that's a huge leap of faith, right? I love the way that he kind of played with this idea of um, uh, faith is the only thing that he would take with him into this voyage, and everything else is kind of superfluous. Um, and and then I guess to close, I'll talk about my piece a little bit. I've been fascinated with latex as a material for quite a while, and in particular when it comes to the human body and how we use latex in like everyday situations, right? With gloves or condoms or masks, right? It's always in relationship to the body. For a long time, I've been um, uh, playing with latex as a stand-in for skin. Also, it has that really, you know, if you pour it really thinly, it has that wonderful quality of skin-like textures and color. Uh, so um, I've been creating these low relief plaster molds of clothing, and then I've been pouring really thin layers of latex, and uh, I love the translucency of them. I love how they're so thin that the wind can blow them and can kind of give them life. And for me, they were uh, again going back to that idea of the animals of the desert. Um, what kind of transformation one has to endure, and what you have to shed to emerge on the other side. You know, to have grown through the experience so that you can continue in this other country that's full of holidays.
Is landscape and ecology something that you think about a lot in your work?
You know, I moved to Pacific about 3 years ago, and I was wondering what living close to the ocean was going to do to my practice. And I found myself more and more drawn to performances on the beach. So I've been doing, and especially, I mean, this beach in particular, as I told you before, this is the beach where Gaspar de Portola first landed, and where, in essence, the invasion of Europeans into America, into California, into particularly the San Francisco Bay, it started right here. You know, so I've been doing these art walks around my neighborhood, just kind of meditating and breathing and thinking about the footsteps of the people who were here before me, and how, you know, just a few blocks away from where I live now, there used to be an Ohlone Indian settlement, and you know what happened to them after the Spaniards arrived. And so thinking about you know, like um, core samples, if you will, like of historical core samples of what happened here. So this is, yeah, I guess the landscape is participating a lot in my art making.
Interesting. Yeah, it's so fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing this work, for producing this work, and collaborating with this group and sharing it, and also discussing it with me.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and your effort and your interest. Um, I really appreciate it.
Well, you're so welcome, and I really feel honored and delighted to, you know, to participate. It's such wonderful material.
Here,
Yeah.
we're all really thrilled, and we really thank you.